Good morning. Today is January the 7th, 2026. It's about 11:02 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And for the record, I'm Yahweh Elohim. We're going to cover today primarily about the United States national security expansion. So, securing Venezuela is going to be step one in this process. Venezuela, as we've talked about over the last couple of days, is a major refuge for enemies of America. So Venezuela at this time has had no positive trade with America. One, and two, they are in our hemisphere. America, as the leading world power, leads these things, and not only technology, not only energy, but also in the structure of the entire world. Because there is truly going to be the communist, the dictatorships, regimes that are mass murdering their people either through depravity or through direct violence is absolutely not happening in the new earth. So these are things that we do need to do. And, for a lot of the yappers, right? I call them the yippy dogs of the world. They want to, scream and shout, how does it have any implications to the United States dealing with Venezuela and soon Greenland? Well, here's the gist. If we choose to do nothing and we turn a blind eye to Venezuela, then that means Russia is continuing to receive oil, which perpetuates its war machine, which at the end of the day, it's costing not only NATO, Europe, but America chiefly, the most money. So if we are having to pay out, and then the threat is increasing, we're actually not having any positive movement. So how do we prevent that? Well, we secure trade deals with Venezuela. We secure a democratic republic government for the people of Venezuela, and we assist the people by military presence and strength to ensure that essentially the drug cartel henchmen that are riding motorcycles with AK-47s through the streets of Venezuela, that those things don't happen. Because with a military presence and a fair and just election going to be held in Venezuela, the United States military will be able to rope in these thugs. These guys, they're driving around on dirt bikes with AKs. They're threatening civilians. And again, that is not the majority. Because if it was the majority, then our move would be a complete takeover and an addition to the United States territories. That's not what we're doing, but instead we are trying to secure the agreements of trade, which again is going to starve out Russia. And then Russia is going to be faced with consequences in the next 18 months, depending on their decisions that they make in the near future. So everything is connected. But if we were to look at a map, and we were to look at Greenland of the Western Hemisphere, we can easily see the strategic importance of Greenland, because if Greenland wants to try to stay neutral in this, the inevitable is going to happen, meaning Russia is going to, and if they decided to take Greenland, they could do it very fast, very efficiently, and then it would be very difficult for the United States or its allies to be able to take Greenland back. So the decision really comes down to, and this has been in suspension now for several hundred years, where the final map is going to lay. And if the United States does not secure essentially the North Arctic, meaning Greenland, that leaves massive exposure to our north. Because Canada doesn't have a military worth a darn. They're going to be useless. And that entire northern hemisphere is exposed to Russian invasion, but also exploration and resource obtaining. Because as the populations expand and grow, and we move forward, we're going to need more and more resources. So that's what I say is money isn't a resource. A resource that Greenland has is zinc, lead, gold, iron, ore, and of course what I need as Elohim right now for my project is going to be magnets. So again, want to strike a deal with Brazil, which will also assist with security guarantees if we're going to be dealing in the Venezuela area. Really what we want to do is we want to shore up the entire Western Hemisphere. So from Greenland, from call it the North Pole to the South Pole. Because in the Southern Hemisphere, this is an area that is not spoken about, but is crazy important for military strategy, but also for future exploration and obtaining more resources. So by having Greenland, that's 836,000 total square miles, 410,499 of ice-free habitation zone. That's a lot of area. And it's roughly 1,600 miles from north to south and roughly 650 miles from east to west. Economically speaking, it possesses high concentrations of zinc, lead, gold, iron ore, and magnets. All of these directly contribute to technological expansion. So things like computers, military technology, satellites, space shuttles, future cars that my blueprints will be coming into. I will be giving my blueprints to leaders of car companies that I feel are worthy. And then my spirit will go into these car companies, and then I will start kind of pumping their heads full of my blueprints for the next era of passenger vehicles. But Baffin Bay and Davis Strait are on the southwest side of Greenland, and they possess large deposits of natural gas and oil. So if the United States is securing oil a lot closer to home, meaning Greenland on the north and then Venezuela to the south, that essentially gives us two more direct deals. The prosperity of Greenlanders will actually increase. So this is not necessarily like changing culture at all in Greenland, just like when the United States acquired Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has now, since the United States acquired it, has been more successful. And when natural disaster strikes in the southern islands like Puerto Rico, they have their, obviously their world power, being a part of that world power, they have access to help. So by establishing the United States as essentially the governing world power of Greenland, it can be Greenland the territory, it can be whatever. I hope Trump doesn't name it Trumpland. I know that was a joke between you and Secretary Hegseth, but let's try not to do that, because I think that could rub salt into an open wound in the international community. Because I get it, Europe and all the neighboring nations out there, you guys don't really understand the importance strategically for the long term. And we don't want to be reactive. We don't want to be reactive that when Putin says, okay, he's going to send in, 500,000 boots on the ground, tanks, subs, and warships, and then within a week, he's in Greenland, then we would have to react as a whole, right? And then you're talking about the long court process that NATO, the European Union, and all you people take forever to do. This is actually going to be the simplest, shortest, most secure way that we can prevent Russia from essentially getting out of its corner, right? So this process is going to continue to push Russia into its own corner, and it's going to isolate Russia, period. And then that becomes China's problem, okay? And as Taiwan is a friend to NATO, to the United States and Europe, we will constantly be there for Taiwan to prevent China's invasion of Taiwan. But this is going to get South America off of the communist proverbial tip, because we don't need Western resources going to Russia. That's not a good idea. So the amount of security that then Greenland would have. They would feel safe, secure. They're not going to be worried about a Russian invasion or a Chinese invasion. They would not have to worry about their resources being squandered and then they're being taken advantage of, because Denmark is the ruling nation of Greenland, and then Greenland is essentially a self-governing type of country. I see none of that changing fundamentally. However, I do see that the United States is going to stake claim. This is per my direction, that we are going to stake claim in Greenland because we want, desire, need those natural resources. Number one. Number two, we need the strategic location, because if we can cover the North Arctic and then down here at the southern tip of South America, I think it's called Drake's Strait. I don't have any good maps I could blow up here. Let me see. Last time I did this, though, I crashed my computer, so I'm going to try it again. Alright. Let's try not to crash the computer. But I want to say it's called Drake's Strait, and that is essentially the small channel that goes from the tip of South America into the southern ice sheet, or Antarctica. Let's see. What's it called? Yeah, the South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands are all around there. And Terra del Fuego, Providence, Rio Gallegos, and El Cafate. And the Falkland Islands, the Maldives, Malvinas. I wish it had the label here. But basically speaking, this is not very big. I'm trying to see if I can get an actual, like, marker. Add path. Here we go. Okay. So we need to protect. Add first point. All right. So let me see. Does it have it in English? Miles. 610 miles. That's how far it is from the south, from the tip of South America all the way to the tip of Antarctica. Oops. Didn't mean to do that. Redo. Okay. So 610 miles roughly. And that is an area that, again, Russian submarines, Chinese submarines, they could stack up right there. And at this point, we don't have any military presence. We don't have any intel. Well, we have intel, but we don't have really anything to do about it. And again, it's no stranger that Russia has subs all around the world. And we don't need Russian subs really anywhere in the Western Hemisphere. We want to keep those guys as far away as we can. And Alaska is obviously a known threat entry point, which is why we have several bases there. And then the Greenland. So Baffin Bay is on the west side. So the import of oil, natural gas, would be a lot closer, which means shipping cost is a lot lower. And essentially, we're getting completely off of the Middle East oil train, because we don't need it. We have enough neighbors. We have enough kind of innovation, however you want to call it. But yeah, these things must happen, because Greenland basically is going to put in a buffer zone from Russia and prevents China or Russia from obtaining the land, and then they would exploit the resources. So it's not a matter of it's a matter of who and when. We don't want to wait until Russia does it or China does it. We want to take advantage of that first and foremost, because if we do that, then we're going to be protecting Greenlanders. And as the United States has already proven, when the United States obtained Hawaii, Hawaii has remained its culture, has thrived now, and now is exporting and constantly moving up. Same thing with Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands. So essentially, the culture is what's most important, right? And essentially not giving our enemies bullets. We don't need to give them bullets, gas. We don't need to give them anything. Instead, we need to show them that if you are going to participate in a righteous world, it requires cooperation and trade, number one. Number two, that the United States, and I don't want to say this and then I get people like hopped up on the subject, but the United States military is one of the like 7 wonders of the modern world. It is truly, I'm trying to refrain from curse words, but there's really no other words I can say, but the United States military is badass in every way. And so much so that instead of Europe trying to give pushback, Europe should be falling behind us and saying we're gonna trust the United States and we're gonna stand behind the United States. Because I'm here to tell you, if Europe as a whole, England, United Kingdom, France, Germany, all of you, if you guys are trying to withdraw out of NATO or somehow penalize the United States for Venezuela and soon to be Greenland, then you are going to screw yourself out of world security, number one, but also out of the new trade agreements. Because I also know that Europe is in need of natural gas and oil, or at least natural gas that Russia was providing. So this goes back to, gosh, who is it? Turkey. That's Erdogan. So Turkey has still been purchasing natural resources from Russia when the United States has told Erdogan not to. This again is it's gonna start painting a picture. So we're not gonna let Russia and China expand, or Iran. We're not gonna let them expand. We're gonna continue to push them into a corner, and we're gonna force them to become a democracy, a republic, and willing and able to trade with the free world, or we're going to keep them in the basement. We're going to keep them in the basement. And eventually they're either going to be starved out and perished, or they will try to fight their way out of the corner, and in which then the Americas will gain more territory. But this is a whole new dawn, a whole new era, a whole new world in which the dominating power is going to be the power in which I, as Elohim, am siding with, and I am in the land of the free as Elohim. So I am going to apply my will, my path, and everything else I can to support and boost my nation. Again, these were promises that I gave to Israel, but Israel, as we've discussed, right? They've chosen another god. They worship rabbis. They're waiting on Mashiach to solve all their problems. Well, guess what? You guys can keep waiting. I don't really care. Because me and America are moving forward. Yeah, allies need the resources, and Greenlanders need protection from Axis invasions. That's a fact. So, that's a fact. And going here. Oops, that's not what I want to do. There are challenges associated with extracting natural resources from Greenland, the Arctic climate, being remote locations, and then environmental concerns and impacts. These are things that Denmark nor Greenland have access to. You guys don't have the access that America has. We have a treasure trove full of not only equipment, not only personnel, not only plans, but we also have agencies that will go in the environmental side. And I, as Elohim, will kind of direct this too, because there are some things that humans, you guys are funny like this. Some things the environmentalists will claim that is harmful, but is actually not harmful. And then other things they'll claim is not harmful, but actually is harmful. You see? So there are ways to do this. And right now it's ran through the Ministry of Mineral Resources, which oversees the exploration and extraction of minerals and the potential development of oil and gas reserves. But they are tiny, they are slow to act, and they can't do it. They can't do it. I give you kind of a parable. One of the shows me and Asherelle watch is the Gold Rush show. And obviously I don't think I even have to expand on this. If you've ever seen the show, you have the two biggest producers, which is, the Beats Mine in Paradise Hill, and then you have Parker's Dominion. And between them two, I mean, they are crushing it, right? They have this process down to a literal science. So they're not guessing really how much gold. I mean, the show boosted up, but these guys are professionals. They're coming into land. They know exactly what to do, how to do it, and when it's over, they're masters at the reclamation process, and within just 6 months to a year, you see all the wildlife moving right back in. Greenery growing right back in, as if it was never touched. So much so that when the miners back in the 1800s and the early 1900s were using dredges, these massive, gosh, I don't even know the weight, hundreds of thousands of pounds, these dredges were just going through the Yukon. Well, the thing is, just 100 years later, their tailings pile, right, the rock and stuff they left behind, miners 100 years later are buying claims with fully grown trees on them, and they don't realize that it's not virgin land. Because the reclamation process, when you're talking about mining, that's what I mean. You're just taking a sandbox. Let's use a sandbox for an example. If I, as God, I'm putting in that sandbox all kinds of fun things, right? But let's say the kid in the playground needs to build his little block house. I, as Elohim, go into this sandbox and I'm starting to put blocks everywhere because I want the child to critically think, how are they going to pull the red block out of this, the yellow block out of here? These are purposes I've given to humanity, because when you're putting in sweat equity to building, obviously, structures, but the future technologies, you're working for it. And it's great for producing jobs. It just all around, it's very beneficial when it's done correctly. So it does nobody good when less than 5% of natural resources are, number one, not being tapped in Greenland, and number two, it's being ran by essentially a micro shop that could be overran by Russian forces and Chinese forces pretty quickly. We need to get in front of that train, secure the top, secure the bottom. From North Pole to South Pole, that entire part of the world is and will be under the United States of America. And its God, who is I. All right. I will take a 5, regroup, and then we will come back to discuss some other topics. And we are back. So, I was catching a few minutes of RFK. Do appreciate the quick movement on, what I spoke about briefly on yesterday's video, but also before. We should absolutely, being the richest nation, it means that our citizens are the model of the world, right? We should be in the 90th percentile of health, longevity, productivity, ingenuity, sustainability, security. All those things are what makes a nation not only rich, but virtually impenetrable. And the idea is, as we are raising the mountain, continuously going to raise the mountain, all the other nations that are led by dictators and communists and socialists, they are going to be overshadowed by us. They're going to have no other choice but to begin adopting the same type of policies that we are instituting and showing the world success through. Bipartisanly, they will want to do the same, or if they don't, their people eventually will demand it. So that is a situation of supply and demand that the world hasn't really seen yet. Because America is the envy of the world for good reason. As I said, their military, in my eyes, is one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. It is, as I said just a little bit ago, right? It is truly badass in all regards. Superiority in the air, land, and sea. Some of the most highly trained intelligence officers, but even the middle to just normal regs or the regular ranks, they are in a class of their own when you're talking about soldiers anywhere else in the world. And Israel too. I will rope them in. They are also highly intelligent, highly skilled, highly trained. And when you look at the, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it can only be said the one way. One American life and one American soldier's capacity and ability to accomplish a job, let's say, is valued at 100. Most other soldiers in any other country, primarily dictatorships or communism or socialist countries, their soldiers' abilities, capacities, and essentially their worth is very low. Which is why dictators and communists and socialist countries use soldiers essentially just as cannon fodder. See, the Americas and Israel neither use soldiers as cannon fodder because they are all highly trained. They're all very sophisticated, and they have technology to make those things even more possible. We, as a nation, as a whole, right, there's massive changes coming, but the changes are going to be for the betterment of the people. The people being secure. The people being healthy again. Think about that, just tying it all together. We need people that are healthy. If they're healthy, they're going to use less health insurance. When health insurance isn't being, relied upon and coming from the insurance industry as I have. I worked in insurance for the better part of a decade. So I seen things that, just taking me being God out of the equation, just from, personal perspective, I'm saying, you see these people that, they can only afford poor people food. That makes them even more unhealthier. The bill is constantly being kicked down the road, and it ends up in hospitals. It ends up in doctors. It ends up where instead of a 70-year-old healthy man or a woman going to a yearly visit and having a situation once every 5 to 10 years, they're having situations sometimes several times in a year. So do you see how that directly contributes to the ballooning cost of not only healthcare, but then we have dramatic reductions in productivity. If we have people that are obese, heart problems, lung problems, brain problems, bone problems, back problems, you name it, cardiovascular problems, by the time they're 40, we're losing a huge pool of our production. And that's what I mean. People are our biggest resource. When people are given good food, they're given a roof over their head, they're given a stable job, economic opportunity, they're given that upward momentum, they themselves are going to want to climb these mountains. They themselves are going to want to stand on top and shout from the rooftops, hey, I made it, right? And then when that one makes it, they're going to reach their hand down and they're going to start helping others make it too. And in the long run, all those things that do make a nation rich and truly successful is going to begin to go up and up and up. And then we get stronger and stronger and stronger. So we're hitting this on all fronts, right? We're hitting this in the health sector. We're hitting this in the national security with Greenland, Venezuela, and then other places in South America. We're going to eliminate the cartel threat, eliminate narcotics. We're going to eliminate the threat of any existential crisis that Russia, China, or any of those bad actors could ever impose on us. We're going to just cut the legs out from under them right now. That's it. The time of the sad days, of the days that the U.S., its alliance, and NATO is hiding behind this, that, and the other are over. The bad guys are put on notice. Change. Get with the program, or you're going to be put into a corner. That's a fact. And that goes for all bad actors. I would like nothing more than today, this week, this month, I would like to see nations sober up. Come to the conclusion, theft, greed, murder for the sake of nonsense is over. And the stage is set for security, for upward mobility, for taking resources that I as Elohim put in the ground for you. Let's take them and let's build. Let's build. Let's build things that you've never thought possible. I can give you blueprints today that would literally elevate you in the energy sector and all these things. And again, I am. But we got to start taking step after step. So the security thing, covered that. And the Minnesota fraud case. This is very glad that this has been busted wide open, because these types of situations, guys, these are drains. Guys, when you have fraud happening with Medicare, with Obamacare, with daycares, with immigration, refugees, that entire donut is a rot. It is a massive gaping hole of American dollars being flushed down the toilet. That can't happen. We should be on a surplus. We should be on a surplus of hundreds of billions of dollars in not that long a time by just shoring things up. Shoring things up. Getting the Minnesota fraud stuff, like, that's billions of dollars that did not end up in the right people's house, plan, person, family. So what we're doing, and if we're not shoring it up, then we're just letting the money, right, being flushed down the toilet. And then, like in this case with the Somalians, they're obviously taking the money, they're giving it to places outside the country. That can't happen. For some of my non-political viewers, I'll put it to you in a parable. Right? As the father, let's say I'm handing out, my son mows the lawn, he gets $25. My daughter, cleaned the dishes, right? Whatever, just for namesake, she gets 25. So I'm paying everybody for their job. But then what happens if the yard wasn't mowed and I still paid, right? Well, then I paid for a service that didn't actually happen. You see what I mean? That's then being taken advantage of. So then the money would stop until the job is resumed, or then I would find someone else to mow the yard to then resume the pay. When companies are committing fraud with the U.S. government, that's what that looks like. They're applying for funds saying, we're going to apply, $1 million towards a refugee daycare in this instance. But in fact, they didn't need $1 million. They didn't even have the people. And that money was then being given to, I don't even know what. But it didn't go towards needy families. You know what I mean? It's abuse. And it's fraud. And unfortunately, the mindset of scheming, right, is also what needs to change. And that next level change is going to be probably the hardest, because you're dealing with a culture change. We don't want a demoralizing type of society, because that type of society, sadly, will never survive and thrive. Right? Righteousness needs to be the capstone of all things, because that means it's the right way to do it. Right? What's the right way? Do we offer our citizens, fresh, organic, non-processed meat, and that is the golden standard? Or do we give subsidies to food companies that are using chicken feet, chicken beaks, chicken skulls, and they're putting it into a grinder and then sprinkling it with paprika and then giving it to kids, calling it nutritious? You see, that's not right. Nobody in their right mind, or who has a mind, would ever say, well, that's a good idea, but it's being done. Hopefully now, with some changes RFK is making, the Trump administration's making, we're going to see those things change. We are also going to see this fraud stop. Health insurance fraud is massive. If we can get the magnetic technology on the bumpers of cars and then start implementing the roads to secure. And then, as I said, it can also help with the police vehicles and the reverse magnet. We're going to have more safe officers being able to execute their duties. We're going to have less productive men, women, children perishing in car accidents needlessly. Okay? But it's also going to give the car manufacturers a chance to innovate a technology that doesn't exist yet. Once it is existing in the United States, then the United States is going to become the largest exporter of so many technologies that you don't know you have yet, because I haven't given it yet. But that is when we're going to be having lots of energy coming in. That's oil, that's gas. We're going to need those things to fuel our production plants. We need energy costs to be lower. That directly impacts the American people, because if mom and dad, me and my Asherah, right, we still pay bills. God or not, I still have bills to pay. We have bills to pay. So instead of my electric bill being $250, if my electric bill is only $150, well, guess what? That now gives me and my family an extra $100 that I get to go spend out in my community. Now, my $100 alone is not going to do much. But if my $100 multiplied by 435 million people, it's a lot. That's a lot of money. And then that is going to get our largest sector moving, right? We need to keep the blood flowing. Economics is all about transactions. So we need to ensure that Americans have enough money to get out there and go on vacation, to be able to do these things. We don't necessarily need people investing for just 2 or 3 years in their vehicle. Then they got to buy another one, because now we're going in the opposite way. Now we're going into debt. Now we're going into expanding the bank. We don't want to do that. We want to have liquid cash. We want to have liquid resources. And all those things, they kind of fall in line, right? And it starts at ground zero with the human being. It starts with them being happy, healthy, and productive. Just like my bees. If they're not happy, they're not healthy, they're not productive, there is no honey. But likewise, if my bees are happy, right? If they're secure, they don't have to worry about the neighbors spraying bug spray on them. I moved them, right? So now they're secure. All these things are in the micro, but they're in the macro. So we're gonna keep rocking and rolling, and we're gonna keep rocking and rolling. So again, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and So I think I will leave it there. My last thing. I do like the reduction of vaccines. There are some that I completely understand that, they should be needed in childhood level, because these things, like polio back in the early 1900s, was a really, really big problem. Most folks back then, they got polio. They did not survive. So we don't want things like that coming back. And I, as Elohim, will do my best to keep those types of things out of righteous culture. But I assure you, some vaccines can and are necessary in those regards. But then when you start over-vaccinating, you can start, again, it's all about balance, right? It's all about balance. So when you're over-vaccinating, then what you're doing is you're actually fighting against the body's natural immune response, which can actually be more detrimental to more simpler things like COVID, like the flu, because you want to have a bit of an exposure to build yourself up. So if you're just vaxxed all the way through, it's like, cool, I didn't get sick for 20 years, but then you died of a cold. Like, that didn't help you. You see? So you want to have that balance between those things. There is no way that you're going to be able to vax yourselves into perfectness, because there's always going to be viruses that are mutating. That's why they were designed by me as mutated viruses. So the point is that the strain can start, but then it will run its course. and then it will lay dormant, and then it will essentially metastasize into a different type of virus. But if you look at it in a positive way, it actually strengthens immune system responses. And not that it matters so much nowadays in the modern era, but in the old times, it was beneficial for getting rid of populations of people that otherwise were the most unsanitary. Those that were not being righteous, they weren't being neat, clean, educated, purposeful. Right? Think of the 5 boroughs of New York in the 1880s. Gosh, there was Spanish flu running through there. There was like just different types of things. And it ravished some of the poorest locations, but at the same time it was kind of like cutting back the flock so then the others could rise. Now I don't think I don't need to use those tactics. I think now we can get with the program that people as an individual, family unit, and then also a citizen unit can move forward with righteousness. Righteousness, good health, prosperity, purpose, obtainment, the American dream. It should be available for virtually people, human beings, right? That's what it's about. How do we make human beings' lives better? If what we do as a person, as a company, as an organization, religious, non-religious, government, non-government, doesn't matter. Are we doing what is in the best interest of our customer, of our human, of our citizen? If we can't check that box in honesty, as you would say in court, standing before Almighty me, if you can't check the box, then you shouldn't do it. Okay. Last note is, I emphasize this, and I know people, it goes in one ear and out the other, but remember, an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. If we as a society can get back into righteousness, let's start seeing righteousness on the TV. Americans and all people, right? They love the TV. I don't love the TV, but I watch it. It's the world in which we live. Okay? But if that is an influence in any way, and it is on some people, on a lot of people, we need to be showing reality. And the reality is that not everything requires, adultery. Not everything requires drunkenness or drug abuse or murder. Like, these things are very unsavory, and they really should be looked at as not good. So when movies come out or media or anything, I would like to see, I don't want to use Little House on the Prairie, but I mean, let's get back to just common sense ethics. If we can show good behaviors in movies and good decisions in shows and good family dynamics, we're going to see that reflection in our society. But when TV and media is trying to say, like, transgenderism's a great thing, you should join the transgender movement, like, that's not righteous. That does not lead to fulfilling human happiness, because it goes against natural universal law, my law and order. They stem many other problems. Right? The HIV epidemic happened because of homosexuality. That's what I mean. We need to be steering away from these things and getting back to common sense approaches for not just American life, but America is and is going to be the model nation, and the citizens of that nation are going to be the model for the world to then seek after. So, with that being said, today is a school day. I have pickup here in just 30 minutes, so I'm going to cut today's video, and we may or may not see you tomorrow.